Hello, welcome to our workshop on Autism Spectrum Disorder Communication Strategies for the Childcare Center. This is part one of a three-part series.
I'm Erin Crawford, registered speech-language pathologist.
And I'm Corrine Daymond, registered speech-language pathologist, and we work for the Provincial Outreach Therapy for Children program at Manitoba Possible. So in this workshop, it's a little bit of an introduction on what autism spectrum disorder is. We're going to also talk about some co-occurring health issues, prevalence, cause, research, and finally neurodiverse versus what neurodivergent means.
So what exactly is autism spectrum disorder, otherwise shortened as ASD? It is a neurodevelopmental condition with issues in both of these areas, social communication and sensory processing. So let's look at these two in some more detail now. So let's talk first about social communication. In no particular order on this slide, these are some of the main indicators of a social communication impairment. People with autism can be very verbal, or they can be minimally verbal, or completely nonverbal, meaning that they cannot use their voice for communication. They can repeat their words or signs or pictures over and over. They can repeat what they hear others say or what they hear on videos, and that is called echolalia. You will notice issues with decreased eye contact and facial expressions and body language in comparison to other typically developing kids. There is less language used for social reasons. Early vocabulary for most kids includes greetings and people and actions. So most young children say things like hi and mama and up and more. But early vocabulary for children with ASD can be more unusual. It often can be numbers or letters or whatever objects or toys that they are most fascinated by. It tends not to be greetings or social words. Kids with ASD tend to prefer solo play. They may be overwhelmed or unsure of play with other kids. If you don't know or understand the play of others, you don't tend to join in. These children often have trouble understanding how to start the play with someone else and how to keep it going. So for example, a chase game with a typical child that child will start by tickling you and then playfully say, I'm going to get you, or they'll say, come get me, while checking to see if you are actually following them. The child with autism may really like this game as well, but can't communicate in the typical way. So they will come to you, crash into you, and then run away without looking back. Sensory processing is another very large topic area. We will cover this area in much more detail in part 2 of our webinar series. But for now, know that kids with autism spectrum disorder are really variable in this area. They may seek out or avoid certain sensations. Most kids with ASD show some sort of repetitive movements, such as hand flapping or rocking. Although most kids like the stability of routine, and that's why daycares generally do the same things in the same order every day, kids with autism may really need it to be even more exact. For example, always sitting in the exact same spot for circle time, or them always having the same blue cup at snack. A change in the routine is usually exciting for most kids, like Guitar Gary coming by or a field trip. But autistic kids may have a strong reaction to this newness and fight it. All kids have their favorite toys, but kids with autism spectrum disorder often have narrow, strong interests that can prevent them from learning to share that item or to try new things. Common special interests with children on the spectrum seem to be numbers and letters, trains, spinning items, and many other things. We can try to work on other related skills while still using their favorites, and we'll discuss a lot more of how to do that in parts 2 and part 3 of this webinar series. This is a 7-minute video from a parent's perspective about his child and the issues they noticed in him. We were unable to play this recording in this recording of this webinar, so we invite you to instead search for it on YouTube and watch it yourself at the end of this webinar. It's called The 10 Early Signs of Autism Updated, February 2018. The father in this video describes his son's behavior as stimming, but we prefer to call these movements repetitive motor movements or sensory seeking. In Alistair, these movements in sensory seeking were things such as head banging, tiptoe walking, texture preferences, rocking, hand flapping, and pouring water between 2 cups over and over. This video does have a good real-life examples of echolalia and decreased eye contact and decreased social and language skills. Over the decades, autism spectrum disorder has been called many things. 40+ years ago, many people diagnosed as mentally retarded actually had autism spectrum disorder. We know now that many ASD people have average cognitive skills, but their behavioral, sensory, and communication issues can interfere with how they can express their intelligence.
There are many health issues that are common with individuals with autism spectrum disorder, which may contribute to some of the challenges they face. These may include mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Other issues you may notice are seizures, digestive issues, metabolism problems, which are how the body breaks down food for energy, and sleep issues. We'll talk about all these in a minute. The other one is uncommon responses to pain, which can be over or under responsive. Most of the time we notice the kids that are the under responsive, and these are the children that may fall down and seem to really hurt themselves, but they don't seem to notice. The children that may be banging their head and not seem to be hurting themselves, they're not feeling the pain. So it's very important for us to watch these children so that they don't harm themselves. There's some syndromes as well that are common or associated with ASD. Fragile X, which is the most common form of inherited intellectual impairment. 1 in 3 children with Fragile X also meet the diagnosis for ASD. Approximately 1 in 25 children with ASD have the same gene mutations that cause Fragile X. So there is some similarities there. Another one is tuberous sclerosis, which is a rare genetic disorder that causes non-cancerous tumors to grow in the brain and vital organs. It occurs in approximately 1 to 4% of people with ASD. Mental health issues are common in individuals with autism as well. According to a study done in 2014 looking at the national needs for individuals with ASD and their families, anxiety in preschoolers with ASD was at 18.9%, school-age children 52%, and a big 70.6% with adults with ASD. ADHD in preschoolers with ASD was 11.3%, 36% at school age, and 34.8% with adults. Depression was found in 0.5% of preschoolers with ASD, 9.3% of school agers with ASD, and 33.3% of adults with ASD. Obsessive compulsive disorder was found in 1.6% of preschoolers, 7.9% of school agers, and 24% of adults with ASD. These numbers may not be completely accurate due to the challenges faced by people with ASD, including difficulty with recognizing emotional state or decreased language skills, making reporting more difficult. Studies have also shown higher numbers of suicides with individuals with ASD compared to neurotypical population. So approximately 25 to 30% of children with ASD have gastrointestinal issues. These most commonly include constipation, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. These issues may be partially contributed to the diet of individuals with ASD, which often consist of foods high in carbs and processed foods and limited fruits and vegetables. Many of the children we see have diets that consist of rice, pasta, crackers, cookies, etc. They may only eat foods of particular textures or colors. Studies have shown children with ASD are up to 5 times more likely to have feeding issues such as food selectivity or refusal and poor oral intake. Although we can contribute these eating challenges to some of the gastrointestinal issues, studies have also been showing that there may be underlying gastrointestinal issues to begin with. A study of almost 300,000 children revealed that children with ASD were almost 67% more likely to have a diagnosis of inflammatory bowel disease. Gluten-free diets have become more popular with individuals with ASD, but there is not much research to back this theory up. Probiotic treatments as well are also being trialed, but again, no treatments have any current research background. 20 to 30% of individuals with ASD have epilepsy. Seizures typically start in the late teens or early 20s, and currently research is looking for predictors before seizures begin. Many children with ASD also have issues with sleep. This may include challenges falling asleep or staying asleep and waking many times during the night. Reports as to numbers vary. Some studies show that 30% of individuals with ASD have sleep issues, and there have been studies that show up to 80% of preschoolers have sleep problems. One study showed that children with ASD spent 15% of their sleep time in REM sleep versus 23% for neurotypical children. REM sleep is the cycle in your sleep pattern when the brain exercises neural connections necessary for good mental and physical health. It is considered the learning phase of sleep, when the brain integrates and processes information from the day and prepares to store it in long-term memory. So as you can see, sleep disturbances can affect cognitive skills. Studies have also shown that these children may be more hyperactive and have more difficulty attending to tasks. Decreased sleep has also been shown to result in increase of the repetitive behaviors that you may see in children with autism. Some of these sleep issues may also be due to the underlying health issues such as the gastrointestinal issues, which may cause difficulty to sleep.
So, the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder has increased over the past several decades. So if you're thinking to yourself, I feel like I see a lot more kids with autism in my daycare centers in the last 10 years, you are right, because you have been. So according to the National Autism Spectrum Disorder Surveillance System, the last dates we had was the report from them from 2018, which talks about numbers from 2015. And this is the latest we have right now, that we're at 1 in 68 children were diagnosed with ASD in Canada. You will notice maybe even a lower number than that, like 1 in 59 or so, if you see numbers from the States. So this has been a 30% increase from 2008, a 60% increase from 2006, and a 120% increase from 2002. So depending on how long you've been in the early childhood game, this is how much you're seeing an increase. So there certainly are more boys than girls that have autism, and that continues as well to this day. So now that we know that it's happening more often, why is autism happening more often, and why does autism happen in any form at any time? And the short answer is we don't know. The cause of autism necessarily is unknown. There appears to be many different kinds or strains of autism. There appears to be both genetic and environmental reasons. But one thing that we do know is that it is not caused by vaccinations or lack of vaccinations or by parenting style or lack of parenting style. No matter what any sort of celebrity or books might tell you. These are the causes as we know of at the moment.
Currently, there is a 1 to 2% chance of having a child with ASD. This chance increases to 25% if there is a sibling in the family with ASD. Sibling studies are currently a common way of studying predictors of ASD. The University of North Carolina did a study of infants who had a sibling with ASD. Using MRIs on the infants, researchers had an 80% accuracy rate of predicting ASD in the sibling. Another study done in 2013 at the Mind Institute also looked at infant siblings of children with ASD. They found babies with increased cerebral spinal fluid went on to have autism. Studies continue to occur to help find early predictors of autism.
So there is a bit of a shift of focus now in treatment and therapy for individuals that have autism spectrum disorder. In earlier years, our focus was certainly to find a cure for this, and thinking of it in a more medical model of autism being a medical disorder and a medical impairment of some kind. Researchers now are looking more at management of issues associated with autism. Anxiety, gastrointestinal issues, seizures, the developmental delay that comes along with it for some people. These are all things that are being looked at now. So with this shift in focus, you may have heard more about the term neurodiverse or neurodivergent when discussing people on the autism spectrum. The neurodiversity term was coined by an Australian sociologist in the late 1990s named Judy Singer. Neurodiverse itself refers to a group of people where some of the members of that group are neurodivergent. So there is no such thing as a neurodiverse individual. The correct term is neurodivergent individual. Being neurodivergent should not be considered an inherent deficit, but simply a difference in processing the world around us. The term neurodiversity refers to the diversity of all people. Learning about neurodiversity can help us move the focus from impairment toward everyone's differing abilities. Between 30 to 40% of the population are thought to be neurodiverse. The remaining majority are neurotypical. Neurodivergent individuals can have variations such as autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyslexia, dyspraxia, hyperlexia, Tourette's. All of these, the language of these terms are still quite fluid. Keep in mind as well is that this neurological variation is not only natural, it is central to the success of our human species. We need all kinds of brains to make the world function. So when we think about the autism spectrum, we want you to think less of a horizontal spectrum like you see at the top of the slide here, where one end is more autistic and one end is less autistic, or one end is more severe or less severe. That is an older way of thinking. We're trying to think now as more of spectrum as this kind of colorful wheel you see at the bottom of the screen, where you have differing levels of motor skills, language skills, sensory skills, perception, executive function, and you may be having higher skills in some of those functions and lower skills in others, which will still be a very circular function. This slide from Neurodiversity Manitoba shows a really good representation of all of those different neurodivergent terms that we were talking about, and the amazing skills that can come with all of these different ways of having a brain and what your brain can do. So Tourette's, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, acquired neurodivergence from other sort of neurological issues, all of these things will contribute to the mix of brains that we need in society to make our world go around. People who are neurodivergent have many strengths, which has always helped our society move forward. So thank you very much for watching this part 1 of Autism Spectrum Disorder Communication Strategies for the Childcare Center. We encourage you to keep watching part 2 and part 3. Thank you.